guys, it's Vanessa from Unmasked. I had a lot of requests to put out a second part to the prior video, so this is part 2 of Brian's decline on the trip. If you haven't watched part 1, it's linked in the description below. I also have the link to all of the videos about this case that include, I have one video, I think it was the first one I did, that has a timeline, a very detailed timeline of their trip and a breakdown up until their domestic dispute on August 12th. Because we've obtained new information, I'm also going to add a detailed timeline and my theories on August 27th through September 1st, including Brian's, in my opinion, manic drive home. In this video, I'm focusing on the new information we have on their last days in Wyoming, why I think we have a good idea on when she died, and a few observations on the crime scene photos and some new information on his ride back. I have had multiple people contact me since the first video I put out. Most of them do want to remain anonymous, and I really can't blame them after the backlash that happens when anyone comes out in this case. However, I think that we now can say that we have a pretty clear picture of Brian and Gabby's relationship. They met in high school, as we know by now, when Gabby was a sophomore and Brian was a junior. Even back in high school, I've seen conflicting reports on when they actually started dating, but even back in high school, they had an on-again, off-again relationship that's been described as drama. People have also said that he tried to present himself as this nice guy, but it was known that he had a temper. In May of 2021, Brian was telling people that he had to leave his house. There are conflicting stories on that. However, some say it's because his parents were getting divorced, and some people have told me that he was just being kicked out. It doesn't really matter because regardless, we know that when they set out on their van life trip, they were not working, money was extremely tight, and Gabby was really excited about building their website and their YouTube channel. We also have a lot of evidence at this point that as their trip went on, their relationship was quickly deteriorating and he was becoming increasingly angry, volatile, and bitter. You can tell by what her parents said from their conversations with Gabby while she was on her trip, his own posts, and the witness accounts of him losing his temper at different points in the trip. So we have a lot of stressors on this trip. We have being in a confined space together for long periods of time, being really tight on money, which is going to stress any couple out, having a tumultuous relationship even before starting the trip, and as I talked about in part 1, having 2 very different agendas and goals for the trip. I think that all of these stressors plus other possible, I don't know, we don't know yet, but possible mental illness or definitely some personality disorders caused the perfect storm and brought everything to a boiling point. I know a lot of people were commenting on the last video that they did go on a cross-country trip a year prior, and I'm aware of that. But if you look back on those videos, which her YouTube video posted on the 19th is a kind of a mashup of both trips, but it has a lot of footage from that trip a year ago. If you watch those videos, Gabby seems completely different. And if you pay attention to the interviews with her friends, a lot of them say she started to fall off with them about a year ago. So it makes me wonder if after they, got quote unquote engaged, because that's a whole confusing thing in itself, that he didn't start tightening his grip and just, like I said, kind of go on this decline over the past year that seemed to really accelerate while they were stuck alone in this van. I personally think that Gabby idealized how this trip was going to be, and instead she was essentially trapped in a van with her increasingly edgy and volatile boyfriend. In part 1, I said that I thought that the incident on August 12th was a foreshadowing of how Gabby died. I feel even more convinced of that now. We already know that everyone has differing opinions on how that situation was handled, but even if you take all of that other stuff out of the equation, you can't argue the fact that the police intervention did interrupt the fight. It de-escalated the situation, and we don't know. It could have actually saved Gabby that particular day. We do have more information on those days, so I'm going to go through what we have and connect some dots. Also, For the people still insisting that Gabby was the aggressor, despite the fact that she is dead and Brian ran and hid, the witnesses to the 27th restaurant fight should kind of clear that up for you. It was basically a repeat of the incident on the 12th, except Brian showed his true colors this time in front of witnesses. He was mad over his $60 bill, and it was clearly stated by witnesses that Brian was acting aggressively and Gabby was crying and miserable. Basically, this time the difference was there were no cops around to put on the good guy act for. As far as this trip where he allegedly flew from Utah to Florida from the 17th to the 23rd, there's a lot of talk about it still. It is one of those things that drives you crazy in this case, but we just don't know enough actual facts about that to factor it into the mix yet. I will say that there are a couple of things that make me believe that he did fly back. For one, Gabby stayed at the Fairfield Inn near the Salt Lake City airport. And two, Brian's sister during an interview said that he flew, but then she kind of cut herself off and stopped talking about it. However, then you've got this witness, allegedly on the 21st, that says that they saw them both. I don't know how reliable that witness is. So it's just a weird part of this case. So I guess we'll just have to wait until more information is released. So let's get into the timeline of Gabby's last days, since we keep getting new information to fill in pieces of the puzzle. On August 25th, Gabby talked to her mother, Nicole, for the last time. She did tell her mother that there were troubles in the relationship. So before we even get to the other public fight on the 27th, Gabby is already questioning things with Brian. Not a lot is known about August 26th. There are a few people claiming to have seen them, but nothing has been officially verified by authorities. A fellow van lifer named Jessica claims that she saw Brian driving his van alone while trying to park in Spread Creek camping ground around 8 p.m. Another witness says that she saw Gabby alone that night at Signal Mountain working on her computer. On August 27th, which is a very important day, a witness claims that she saw Gabby at Signal Mountain early in the morning around 7:30 a.m., and someone else saw Brian pulling into Spread Creek around 10:30 a.m. The next thing that we know about that day is that Gabby and Brian went to the Mary Piglet restaurant in Jackson around 1 p.m. They must have parked a little ways away from there because they arrived on foot. We know from witnesses and the restaurant that Brian got angry over his $60 tab and became aggressive with the hostesses. It escalated to the point where they were asked to leave and Gabby began crying. It was reported that Brian re-entered the restaurant at least 4 times to confront the employees while Gabby stayed outside on the sidewalk in tears. She finally came back inside, apologized for his behavior, which I also think is very important, and was able to get him to leave. It's about a 35-minute drive back to Spread Creek from the restaurant. I think that much like the 12th, as they were driving back, their fighting escalated. Patterns are everything when looking at people's behavior, and Brian seemed to have a pattern of taking Gabby's phone, her keys, her ID, and locking her out of her vehicle. This is not just from the August 12th incident, we've also heard other people corroborate that. It seems like he did things to punish and control her when he got mad. I think that these same patterns likely happened again, and as they were driving back to the campgrounds, he likely took her phone to prevent her from calling or something like that, because it was reported that that happens in their fights. It happened on the 12th. I think it's a fair assumption that their fights kind of go like they do, and something like that happened in the car. I'm guessing that things got physical again, just like the 12th, and I do think there's a strong possibility that Gabby told him she was done. She had just told her mom that she wasn't sure about the relationship 2 days prior to this. Gabby also had her friend Rose meeting them in Yellowstone 2 days later, and I think that would have been a huge threat to Brian. I believe that we'll find out that the fight escalated if we get answers to this. I do believe that it happened in the van. We know that between 6 and 6:30 p.m., the Red, White, and Bethune YouTube channel drove past Gabby and Brian's van in their RV, and we see what looks to me and many others like the rear van door shutting as they approach. I do think that Gabby was already dead at this point, and that she was killed between 2:30 and 5:30 p.m. It would be really interesting to know the time of the text from Gabby's phone on the 27th that said, "Can you please help Stan? I'm just getting his missed calls and voicemails." Since it stated that it was referring to her grandfather, Stan, I think that the most likely scenario is that her grandfather was calling and Brian had her phone. I think he was annoyed or frustrated with it, and he just slipped up by saying Stan instead of Grandpa. I really do think it's that simple. The timestamp would just be interesting to see if she was alive and he had possession of her phone while he texted that, or if she had already been killed. Another reason I think that she died before 6 p.m. is the position of the van when the RV drives by. You'll notice that it's at an angle with the back end facing down the hill that goes down into the creek. We now know that's where Gabby was found, of course. I think he was parked to make it easier to unload her and bring her out to the creek. Of course, this is all allegedly, in my opinion. It's chilling, to say the least, to think that they drove by very close to the time, most likely, that Gabby died. And I don't know about you guys, but I always think like that. Like, what if they had come by, just 1 hour earlier? And what if they would have decided to stop and approach the van? I'm sure they've had time to think about all of these things as well and have it sink in. It's just extremely creepy. I wanted to touch on the evidence markers really quick. I see some people saying that these must be bullet holes. I have a friend that is certified in canine search and rescue, and she's done many searches like this. I asked her about these pictures, and she said that the orange spray paint just marks that there is evidence nearby. They don't spray paint over the evidence, obviously, because it would contaminate it. So, for example, they show this log with the 2 orange marks. In my opinion, that's not showing a bullet hole. I think something was just resting against it and close to those marks. That brings me to the next thing I wanted to mention. Again, this is just my opinion. You may see something totally different. We know that Gabby was found under some trees. There's this black thing that I originally thought was a tarp, but then I saw Gabbys Backpack on thedirt.com on one of their stops. I did a side-by-side, and I think that this could be Gabbys Backpack. The colors are the same and in the same order. I just think that the bag is flipped backwards in this picture. It also looks like it might be a little torn up at the bottom. I'm assuming that after she was put under the trees, that the backpack was planted next to her against the log. Something else hit me as well. I've heard a lot of people say that it's really odd that investigators told the family that it was her without completing the proper forensic testing so fast. I think that it's very likely that this was Gabby's backpack and it contained something that they knew was hers, possibly even her ID. It could have also been her tattoos. I just thought that that could be another possibility. So please let me know in comments if you think this is her backpack or if you see something totally different. The Daily Mail made an observation that there were rocks around what they thought was a fire pit. Did Brian stay that night by the van figuring out what to do? Did he burn some evidence that night? I just thought that was interesting as well. I know there are varying opinions on why Brian was at Coulter Bay on the 29th, but I personally think that he decided to hike Snake River to Coulter's Bay to establish an alibi, so if someone came across her, he could claim to be miles away. I do not think that he ran and then changed his mind. Coulter's Bay is the completely wrong direction. He wouldn't hike northwest that long if he was trying to flee back to Florida, which is southeast. We know Miranda Baker picked him up at the Coulter Bay showers at 5:30 p.m. on the 29th. That's also the exact time the showers close. I think he threw things away and cleaned up, showered. He probably changed his clothes as well. Miranda said he was wearing long sleeves and pants. It does get chilly in the mountains at night, but I think he was most likely wearing long sleeves to cover up possible defensive wounds. I also think that the things that he said to Miranda and her boyfriend on the car ride were intentional. First of all, he used his real name and introduced himself as Brian, so there's that. He made sure he told them where he hiked. He made sure to mention his fiance back at their van and their social media blog, and he even made a point to mention bringing a tarp. Also, no one that we've heard from has really described Brian as being very social or outgoing, and he made sure to talk to both women that picked him up that he hitchhiked with and give them all of those details. The federal arrest warrant for Brian includes the dates of August 30th through September 1st, so I do think he left Wyoming on the 30th. We also know that a text was sent from Gabby's phone on that day that read "no reception in Yosemite." I could be wrong, of course, but I think that people are reading too much into the text. I think he was panicked to get home and he needed to buy some time. Gabby talked to her mom every few days, and she hadn't spoken to her mom in 5 days. On the missing persons report, it says last seen on August 30th at 7 a.m. in Grand Teton National Park. I think what that actually means is last contact. I could be wrong, but I think that that is telling us that the Yosemite text was sent at 7 a.m. on August 30th. I think he simply sent the text so that no one would be worrying and looking for her. He needed to buy time. I think the Yosemite part was a mistake because he was most likely in a frantic state. It's approximately a 35-hour drive from Spread Creek to Northport. I do think he was in some kind of hyper or panicked or manic state. Remember that Gabby's friend said that he struggled with insomnia. Maybe it was that, maybe it was induced by something else, but it does seem that he made really good time. We were able to get in touch with the ZX gas station in Johnson City, Illinois, and they verified that he stopped there on August 31st at 8 p.m. They have him on camera getting out to fill up the van and then getting back into the van while he waited. He did not go inside or interact with anyone. We also know from their Spotify account that he was downloading songs and making playlists on his drive home on the 30th and the 31st. The distance from Johnson City, Illinois to Northport is 14 hours. A license plate reader captured his plate, as we know, entering Northport at 10:26 a.m. on September 1st. That's 14 hours later, so that tells us that he drove straight through the night other than stops for gas. If you work backwards from his gas stop in Johnson City, he had approximately 21 hours of driving before that. The very latest he could have left Wyoming is around 10 p.m. on the 30th. We don't have any other times of his other stops at this point, so we really can't say for sure when he left. I think that all of these little details are very important to paint the picture of exactly what happened. Of course, the hunt is still on for Brian Laundrie. It's been a crazy deal on its own. Even up through me making this video, there's been allegedly new sightings and new reports coming in of different parks that he's at in different parts of Florida. I've really never seen anything like this. The latest buzz circling social media in the hunt for Brian is that a tip was given to Dog the Bounty Hunter and that the person indicated that Brian may be hiding in a campground in Pinellas County. It's Fort DeSoto campground, and it's got a lot of different islands around it that you can get to by canoe. Daniela Hurtado tweeted earlier that she did get some documentation from Pinellas County Parks, and it did confirm that Brian's mom, Roberta, checked in on September 6th and checked out on September 8th. It did not say if anyone was with her, but that's still very interesting. Brian and Gabby have camped there together before. Looking at Gabby's Instagram, the two visited this park just 7 months ago in February of 2021. Gabby also left a review of this campground on July 26th while they were in Utah. Investigators are denying that they are looking in that area or that they are even aware of any tips in that area, so stay tuned. Gabby's parents had a press conference on FWLA today. I just have to say that I absolutely love her family. They all got matching Let It Be tattoos in Gabby's honor. They have also started the Gabby Petito Foundation. I do have the link in the description. All funds will go to help provide resources to families with missing children. So we'll have to keep putting these things together as we get new information. Right now, of course, the biggest question is, where is Brian Laundrie, and did he have any help escaping? Is he hiding in a campground somewhere? Hopefully we'll have the answers to these questions soon, and hopefully Gabby can get justice. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified of all of my upcoming videos on this case and others.